And welcome to a Modern Sales Pros event. I'm super excited to chat with our amazing panelists today that we have here. But before we begin, I'd love to start things off with a fun little icebreaker as we let folks trickle in. I'd love to ask our lovely panelists today if you are a night person or a morning person. And how about Sarah? You can kick things off.
Absolutely. I'm a morning person. I say getting me out of bed is one of the most difficult tasks of the day. But once I'm out of bed, I'm full of energy. So definitely a morning person, despite not having children to wake me up.
Very nice. Are you a big coffee person as well, or do you kind of just wake up with the sun and
No,
get
absolutely.
it going?
Coffee would happen within minutes of getting up. That's
Very
probably
nice.
what helps.
Jeff, what about you? Morning or evening?
Yeah, I never used to be a morning person for obvious reasons. Tough to get out of bed in the morning sometimes, but I think as I've gotten older, I have to concur with Sarah. I think I'm a morning person. You got the full day ahead of you. It's exciting. And especially I like to try to work out in the morning sometimes. And I feel like once you do that, you feel really accomplished and you haven't even really started your work day yet. So I think I'm going to go with morning.
I want to be a recovering morning person. So like I've got a 9-year-old, have to get him to school every morning. So I'm definitely a morning person. And my body's on like this clock. Like no matter what, I'm up by 7 a.m. It doesn't matter what happens. I'm up by 7 a.m. So even though, the weekends, my wife and I like, have a few beverages, I am still up at 7 a.m. So that's why I say I'm a recovering morning person, because it would really be nice to, sleep in, let my body sleep in now and again, but I just can't. So
Do you get on average like 6 to 8 hours of sleep if you wake up at 7 a.m.?
oh yeah.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, it looks like everyone on this call is a morning person. I recently moved from East Coast to West Coast, and my body still hasn't adjusted. So I'm naturally waking up at like 5 to 6 a.m., which is great because it feels like I get to work out and get that out of the way, and I feel like my day is set. When I sleep in around 11, which is very rare these days, I feel like my whole day is wasted. But yeah, it looks like everyone here is a morning person. And I love to know everyone tuning in today for this event. Are you a morning person or a night person? And also let us know where you're calling in from in the chat. All right, so let's get started. Today's topic, automate, motivate, and optimize 3 secrets to sales comp nirvana. But before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about the team at Modern Sales Pros. Hi, everyone. My name is Angelica. I'm one of the community event managers at MSP. And for those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operation, and enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they may not know about. We do this through live sessions like the one you're at today. We also have an online robust forum and our quarterly summits, which is coming back in April. And if you're not already part of MSP, you'll be invited to join after this event. And quick housekeeping notes, this event is being recorded, so if you have a friend or colleague that couldn't make it, don't worry, the recording, key takeaways, and any questions that the folks are answering today will be on the MSP previous event page before end of day, so stay tuned for that. And if you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner, and we'll be sure to get that at the event today. And this event wouldn't be made possible without our sponsor, today's event, Palette. Easily create and maintain efficient compensation plan for your plans built for your growth. No more spreadsheets, no more headaches, and motivate your sales team thanks to clear goals and immediate rewards. Palette Sales compensation software helps you calculate commissions automatically and track performance and quota achievement at scale. I'm going to drop their link in the chat to learn more about Palette, so be sure to check them out. They're doing amazing stuff. Now on to our panelists today. I'm going to pass it off to David, who will be moderating today's event. David, please introduce yourself, and then I'll come back for wrap up.
Awesome. Thanks, Angelica. Hey, everybody. So my name is David Weiss. I am the Chief Revenue Officer for a company called The Sales Collective. So we are a coaching, training, and sales process building organization. And I'm also the founder of an app that you can find in the Apple App Store called DealDoc. That's all about helping sellers find gaps within their sales opportunities. So That's me. Sarah, over to you.
Great. Thanks, David. I'm Sarah. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Pallet. As Angelica mentioned, Pallet is a sales commission automation platform. We help companies not only save time and increase the accuracy of a commission calculation, but we also give sales reps real-time views into their commissions, incentivizing them to hit those goals. I'd say I've been here for about 9 months. It's my third time joining an early stage company to really test, build, and create the go-to-market strategy, bringing companies from 0 in ARR to over 10 million. And Jeff, popcorning over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Hey, everyone. My name is Jeff Kirchick. I'm leading up sales at a fintech startup called Able. Able is an artificial intelligence tool that helps to automate a lot of the processes around commercial lending. So I've been spending most of my career in the enterprise selling environment, mostly working with financial services. Based in Boston, very passionate about all this stuff. Wrote a book a couple years ago called Authentic Selling: How to Use the Principles of Sales in Everyday Life. And looking forward to joining you guys for hopefully it'll be a great conversation.
Absolutely. So excited for the conversation today. So we're going to break up this talk into three sections. We're going to start with how do we motivate salespeople using a really good comp plan? I think that's something that's super top of mind for a lot of folks. We're then going to get to, how do we then, optimize that comp plan to drive the best results? And then automation as it relates to being able to quickly get either the business or salespeople visibility into that plan. So we're not having to use like Excel spreadsheets and back of, sticky notes to calculate how we should get paid. So that's gonna be the flow of today's conversation. Let's kick it off with motivation. So Sarah, let me turn this one to you, and then we can go to Jeff. But when a business is thinking about designing a comp plan that can drive behavior and motivate their sellers, what are some like of the macro things they should be thinking about and considering?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, it's important to know we get the behavior that we incentivize for. So really, it all starts with the design of your commission plans. If your commission plans incentivize and align with the company goals, you will be motivating your reps to do activities that also align with those same KPIs. In terms of some features, I'd say quota accelerators are a must. They're going to be driving high performance, and they're also going to prevent things like sandbagging. Spiffs are another great feature to add. They'll drive a fun and competitive environment that can also motivate some behaviors apart from those major revenue generation numbers, I'd say. And then the last feature that I would say is hugely important in designing and operationalizing our comp plans is giving everybody visibility into it. Our reps need a constant reminder of how their actions can drive their income. And without this constant reminder, it doesn't matter how you've built those compensation plans. If they can't find how they relate, they're not going to be driven to do those activities. So they need to be able to see in real time how their actions can drive their income. That payout schedule is a great lever for you as well. I always recommend paying out as quickly as possible. So don't wait for the end of the quarter or for the end of the year. Pay out monthly if you can.
Absolutely. No, really good recommendations. And, I think we've all been there and actually seen sellers take hours out of their day trying to plug in things through an Excel spreadsheet and do, complicated math. Well, complicated for me, it's probably basic, adding for some, but trying to figure it all out. And it can be a productivity killer. You're sitting there and you're can you get back to selling? You'll make more money as opposed to trying to calculate the revenue. But anyways, it's good to drive that visibility. Jeff, what about you? What are you seeing in your world related to this?
Yeah, I think everything Sarah said is are awesome ways to incentivize folks. If I were to go on a more macro level, I would say it's really important to show the individual and in a data-driven fashion how it's attainable for them to earn these incentives. There's a lot of jobs out there that can promise you a specific OTE, or they could say, hey, you've got $1 million OTE or a $2 million OTE. That sounds really exciting, but anyone can say these things, right? How do you know that the actions that you're going to take are going to allow you to hit these goals? I think sellers are more motivated when they feel that there's an actual basis upon which that they can achieve the objectives you've set out for them. If you can show them look, based off of your past behaviors, if you do X, Y, and Z, this is how much money you're going to make if you do these things. Or, look at this other person or these other people in our company, or what percentage of them have been able to do this, then you're naturally going to incentivize people. I think people get discouraged organically when they feel that the incentives you've laid out for them are unfair. But it's objectively not unfair if ahead of time you've aligned on why it's reasonable. You've shown them in a data-driven fashion why it's really on them and not you if they're unable to hit target. So I think fundamentally, no matter what you do, whether it's spiffs, accelerators, whatever the OTE is, you need to be able to show a seller how you got there and why it's reasonable and why it's attainable. And I think that will naturally get them motivated and excited to go out and do it.
That makes sense. Have either of you, and maybe Jeff, will start with you on this one, have either of you seen changes in either like the traditional 50-50 base plus variable for an OTE shifting, due to the economic climate we're in? Have you either of you seen that maybe going to like a 60-40 base to cover sellers on some of the downturn, or even, reductions of quotas or further accelerators, being ramped or added to the comp plan? Jeff, have you seen anybody making changes because of that?
Personally, I've not seen it. I think it's just a very standard. I might be wrong. I mean, maybe it's happening all around me and I'm just completely unaware of it. I think what I see more often is actually just that the stage of the company might impact that to some degree, and kind of like what you want the person to do. So for example, if you're the first seller in an early stage company, the company doesn't really know what's reasonable and what to give you. And so the activities that they incentivize might not even be closed deals, but might be more like activity based as you seek to obtain product market fit. And that in that case, it might be more of a 60-40 or 70-30 with some more guarantees or something like that. I think in more mature organizations, you don't really have that problem because you have more data to draw from. That's where, Sarah, I think, probably has more experience than I do. So I'd be curious, Sarah, if you're seeing, people that aren't doing a 50-50 split anymore.
I'd say the standard that we're seeing is still the 50-50 split. I don't think people have changed this too much. But kind of what you said earlier, David, around more kickers, more accelerators, a little bit of reduction of quota. We need to incentivize our reps still, and the market is shifting. And if our quotas are no longer incentivizing, then we're losing this powerful lever we have. So it's silly I believe it's silly for companies not to be reassessing their quotas and their plans in this current market.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I would agree. Let's talk about kind of the plan design a little bit, because being in sales for 20 years, I think I've operated under, 40 different comp plans, because, they change all constantly. And, I've had some, and I've seen some where it's like, we're going to incentivize term length. We're going to incentivize services. We're going to, adjust and provide additional kickers based on where you are to plan, based on the product that you're selling and the level of profitability it has for us. There seems to be a lot of levers that can be pulled. And then Sarah, to your earlier point, we're going to throw in spiffs, and, there's just so much that companies can do. But is there, what have you seen the best organizations do, or what are you seeing as best practices out there? Is it good to, pull every lever you can think possible? Is it better to simplify it? Like, is it a blend? Like, what are you thinking out there?
I would say a blend. If you go overly simple, I don't think it's impossible to incentivize all the right behaviors. Companies tend to lean on or rely on the simple one because it's easy to operationalize. And of course, that's where automation tools come in. I love kickers personally, and a lot of our customers use them. They are easy for reps to understand, which means they're actually going to be motivated by them. And they're easy things to play with. We know what those activities or features of the deal that we want them to be incentivized by, whether that is throwing a kicker on deals without discounts or hitting a certain ACV. I think that's a great one. That one's also going to incentivize different actions earlier in the sales cycle. We're going to outbound companies that are potentially bigger or have opportunity for bigger deals. Kickers for inbound versus outbound. I think there's no one size fits all. It's very specific on, we're going to talk about this a lot today, what your company goals are. But I think they're a great tool to use.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're thinking about, like, to your point, if you have a tool that can automate it. There's so many organizations that if they don't have something like that, we'll just give everybody 5% of the deal or 10% of the deal. But if you can have something that can really tie into every single lever you're trying to pull, but then make it really easy to see what those levers are and then execute on them, you can, incentivize lots of different behaviors to drive outcomes. So, yeah. Jeff, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Sarah. I think a blend is good. I mean, the reason you wouldn't want to overcomplicate something isn't even necessarily because you don't want to track it in a spreadsheet. It's just because for the rep, it becomes in their head so hard for them, to understand what's going on. It's like Zach Galifianakis meme in The Hangover where he's got all the numbers spinning around his head. It's kind of that same exact thing. Like, it's hard to motivate someone if they don't even understand what they're supposed to be motivated by, right? But in the advent of these technologies, like Palette, for example, and others that are out there, you've got an opportunity to make this really simple for people. And let's face it, everyone loves these spiffs. Everyone loves these kickers. Everyone loves hitting the accelerators through the quota. They love the competition. So, like, why would you remove this environment from your team if it's really simple for you to to use these tools that make it simple for your reps? The one thing I will say, though, is that you want to, I'm a big believer in authenticity and that you really want to do well by the customer. And so while I do think you want to incentivize behaviors that are good for the company, what's ultimately good for the company is that the customer's happy. And so I think it's important to remember that a lot of like renewals and customer success, actually, I forget the statistic, but like it's some insanely high percentage of people and customers will say that like their sales process influenced whether or not they would renew, like not even their usage of the product, but how they felt about the sales process. So I think something that's also important to keep in mind is like, can you compensate your reps even just for the customer lifetime value of the deal? Are they bringing you good relationships? Are you incentivizing them to upsell these accounts? Because if so, the rep might be smart enough to say, look, I'm not going to pull some of these levers now. I'm not going to push this customer because if I can make them happy, I actually can get more, juice out of this relationship down the road. Right. So I just think that you also want to be mindful of like the long-term impact when you're incentivizing reps so that they're not going out there and trying to do what's going to give them like immediate gratification. So to the extent that you can think about that too, I think it's pretty important.
And so let's just unpack that really quick. So are you of the mindset of more accelerators, less decelerators? Because hey, look, if a 2-year deal is what's best for the customer, but a 3-year deal is what's best for us, let's add a little bit of a juice on the 3-year, but let's not penalize the rep for going to 2 because it was right for the customer. And then maybe along the same lines, I don't mean to like hit with multiple questions here, but the thought could also be, are we I'm trying to think the best way to word this, but let's stick with the first question because I don't want to hit 2 in a row. But like accelerators versus decelerators, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I'm of the mind that that's where I fall. I think it can be a little demoralizing for folks. You don't want to incentivize them to do things that are not going to be good in the long term for the relationship. So that's my opinion personally, but I don't know what you think, David or Sarah, if you have a viewpoint on that.
I'd say in terms of like quota attainment decelerators, I'm not against that, whether you have a cliff. We definitely don't want to demotivate our team. To what you were saying before, though, I really believe in not just commissioning the upfront contract. And so even if it is better for the company to close that 3-year deal than the 2-year deal, it's better for the rep, or it's better for the customer to do that 2-year deal. Show the rep that you understand that they are closing a valuable customer by giving them some sort of commission later on when they continue on, whether they sign a new contract or not. So you can do that with some sort of pay on invoice, pay on collections, but I definitely don't think you just want to be looking at upfront contract value.
Yeah, that makes sense. And where I was thinking from a secondary question or is like the weight of these things. So like, do we put such a heavy, like, is it better to have lots of, little weighted items than maybe 1 to 2 heavier weighted ones? Because then again, we don't want necessarily to create so much of a weight on one area that someone is like forcing that to get paid more. It's little bumps versus the big bump that may drive a stronger client-facing reaction. Any thoughts on that from you two? Maybe Jeff to unpack yours, and then Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, the common structure. I mean, when we're talking about what we're talking about right now, I feel like we're generally referring to like spiffs and other kickers and things like that. These are generally where you're going to see like contract length or, payment terms. That's where you generally see those things. And in my experience, those are weighted very little relative to the actual contract. If I'm, in an enterprise space, I'm maybe seeing like a 10%, 12% commission, and then the accelerators, depending on the stage of the company, could sometimes exceed 20%. Those are big. I mean, if you're closing $1 million deals, you can do the math, right? That can be a big payday for somebody. But then consider like if they're getting an extra 1 or 2% for the contract length of the spiff, or sorry, the payment terms, are you going to jeopardize your 10 to 20% because you're trying to push them on the contract length? Probably not, right? So they're kind of like nice to haves. They're there in the background. And I like that because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is secure the business and secure the revenue. You'd like to get it as long as you can. But at the same time, if your product is worth its weight, you should be getting a renewal, right? If you don't have product market fit, that's really the bigger problem, right? So, to me, I think that you're generally seeing this more, most of the weight is going to be just on the contract itself.
Awesome.
I don't have too much more to add. I couldn't agree with that more. If you put too much weight on those little kickers, your reps are going to start gamifying them, and you're not going to see a good outcome. So absolutely agree with Jeff.
Good call. Appreciate you guys going down the rabbit hole with me on this one. So from a gamification perspective, so like let's talk about how we can create competition on the team, as well as the value of the visibility that people are getting through the now having a dashboard or a comp plan that they can readily see and potentially see others. Are you seeing organizations use the comp plan from a gamification perspective to know where other people are as it relates to the metrics and areas you're trying to drive?
Yeah, I guess I can speak about that. I've had a lot of experience with this, some good, some bad. Especially with SDRs. It's a lot of fun running competitions with SDRs. I don't know, something about just, how hungry they are and how competitive they are. Generally a junior level position, folks that really want to prove themselves. I've had some really good competitions where I'm putting people competitive against each other, some really cutthroat things where people are sandbagging their meetings till the end of the day on purpose so that no one else will know what number of meetings they have. Some really funny stories to tell. But at the end of the day, when I look back at some of those, I question whether I was really fostering a team environment or if I was really just getting people to, play a game against each other and cause some resentment and maybe not even be supportive of one another in some cases. And we used to use a tool called Ambition, which I think is still out there. It's a great gamification tool. I have no stake in Ambition, just throwing it out there. I think there's a number of these tools. As time's gone on, I really like actually making the competitions team-based. I like to make it, when I say team, I mean like the whole team. And maybe to a lesser degree, if you've got pods, you can do that too. But I really think the more that you can make it a team effort, the better, because ultimately what you want is everyone playing together. And as much as it's fun and as much as we all like generally hire a lot of athletes and sales or people that have that athlete mindset and they can handle competition, it's not true for everyone. A lot of people are motivated internally. They don't care about beating everyone else. They have goals for themselves, and you want everyone to think about the team. And so I really like to organize team-wide collaboration types of events. We either win or we fail as a team. But, I know that's controversial because you've got high performers and low performers. Some people don't like the idea that, everyone benefits in the same way. But again, this is strictly for competitions. So you still have a comp plan, right? Like the high performers still make a lot more money, right? So that's the way I see it. Sarah, would love to hear your thoughts too.
I'm very aligned with what you said. I've done a lot of individual spiffs and challenges, and Palette has a great tool on it to simplify that. It's great to get the team going, but yes, potentially it has them hyper focused on very specific activities. Potentially those are the activities you're really looking to drive home that month. So could be a great thing. I love a team challenge. And these can be in the form of short-term monthly challenges, spiffs, things like that, or you can build it as part of the compensation plan. So they have the majority of their comp plan is based on their own quota, but you have another portion of their plan on team performance, company performance. It's going to get your high performers to work with their mid-lower performers and increase their output. It'll make everybody a little bit more committed to helping their team succeed.
Yeah, I love the thread we're pulling as it relates to, like, things being team-based versus less individual. And then there's also, people that, and we've focused a lot on, what I'd consider more like extrinsic motivation. I'm going to dangle a carrot, you're going to chase it, and you're going to capture it. And there's some, and we're kind of talking about this. There are definitely a lot of extrinsically motivated sellers, but there are also people that have either made a lot of money or really see their individual job as sales as a helping profession, regardless of necessarily the money being the main motivator. Money's often a motivator to some extent. But what about folks that are more like intrinsically motivated, where they're doing it for the love of the game, or altruistically motivated, where they're doing it to have some freedoms in other places? Have you all ever encountered that or built plans or ideas around how to drive other forms of motivation?
I think first and foremost, as leaders, we need to know our teams. We need to know if kicking the ass motivates them. Hope it can say ass on here. Or if they need a hug, or if they need incentivized by that pay. As leaders, I think praise is one of our number one levers for motivation. Studies have even shown that people have a boost in performance when they have been praised for their hard work recently. I think the studies are in like the last week. In a remote environment, I think this is exacerbated. We need to find opportunities to give them shout outs publicly, privately, in all hands and Slack channels. I also think that career development is a huge motivator for a lot of people. So as leaders, as managers, sit down with each of everybody on your team and understand where they want to see themselves in 5 and 10 years, and find opportunities to have them flex some of these muscles, whether that is leading a workshop, maybe an outbound calling because they want to lead a team of BDRs one day, or help build a playbook, introduce them to people that can help hone some of these skills. So I think some of these motivators are outside of our comp plans, and we can build fun little parts of this into our comp plans. But I think the point of this conversation and of this question specifically is, how do we motivate outside of things relating to money?
Yep. Jeff, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say though, the first thing I do with any new hire I bring in, or even in a job interview, or if I'm taking on a new mentee, I run them through an exercise where I ask them, "What is your why?" And I try to get them to get to the real answer and not the lie that they're going to tell me at first. That, like, the real answer is that they want to make a lot of money for some reason, usually, right? And like, what is that reason? I mean, let's face it, no one came out of the womb because they're like excited to go work for you at your company or like someone else's company, right? Like, they can tell you that in the interview all day, that they love your culture and like the gummy snacks you have in the office or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're there because of something that they want for themselves. And the sooner that you can be honest with each other about what that thing is, the better relationship you're going to have. I'm very candid with people that I don't want to work in sales forever. I want to be a screenwriter. Working on a book right now it's actually not a book about sales. It's just short stories, right? Like, that's what I want to do. It's just not a easy thing to do. And I want to make a lot of money so that I can afford to do it. Like, I tell people that in job interviews, and I think that it's important that they know that, because they should know what's at stake. Like, would you rather hire someone who lies to you, or someone who actually has thought about why they want this and has something on the line? Now, why am I bringing all of this up right now? Well, I'm bringing it up because, to answer your question, David, if you understand what someone really wants for themselves, that's what I would be trying to give them, right? if they want education and they want to work on getting an MBA after they work for you, like, are there courses that you can incentivize them with between now and then? I had someone who worked for me who's like, look, I live in Hoboken. I want to go down to the Jersey Shore every Friday over the summer. If I do a good job, can I do that? Like, I don't care what your motivation is. If that's what you want to do and you want to go to the beach a day a week because you're doing a good job, so be it. Everyone has something that they want, right? You got to know what that is. Maybe they just want to get lunch with you and pick your brain, sometime, and learn about like how you became VP of sales or whatever, right? Like, you could be surprised about what would actually get someone really excited. Sarah mentioned like professional development, opportunities to go to conferences for junior reps is always exciting. They get to travel. So all sorts of things, but you got to cut down to like, what is it that you want for yourself? And what are some things along the way that I can give you that are going to help you that are not money?
Yeah. No, Jeff, I'm glad you brought that up. It's really good, man. When I was at a Career Builder many years ago, my leader did a very similar thing with half days on Fridays if the team was at a performance level. And I love that so much. I've literally carried that with me through almost every job that I've had, where either me as the leader had an agreement with my leader, or me as the leader had an agreement with members of my team that if it's what they wanted to do and they were at certain levels, that's something we carried through. But I love the conversation that just takes place around like, what's important to you? What are you passionate about? If you weren't at work, what would you be wanting to do? So, and then let's, seek to understand that and then build plans around it. Because ultimately, like, that's what's going to motivate someone, is to get the end result that makes them happy in their lives. So, really good call outs, both of you. So have you seen any of this stuff, like, change as companies grow? Like, I've worked at really large organizations that were very, process oriented and methodical, and you had to stick in this box. I've also worked at organization startups where it's like, do whatever you want, just accomplish these goals. I personally love that. That's why I'm in the startup space. But have you all seen, like, as organizations grow and change, these types of things change with it? Any thoughts there? Sarah, let's kick this one over to you to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the rep that joins the 5-person organization or a 5-person sales org is going to have different motivators likely than the person that joins the larger organization, based on really what the job entails. There is no simple playbooks, success methodology, or you do A plus B and you can make X amount of money, or you can get promoted to this role when you're joining that 5-person company. So I think they're going to have a lot more motivation around the bigger picture of building out, finding product market fit, of building out a successful sales organization and product. So we can build some of these factors into their commission models, but we can also motivate with these because they're inherently going to have those as motivators. At a larger company, as you said, David, those are there. There's a box. It's, if you look like this, if you act like this, if you can fulfill these roles in a certain way, you can make a certain amount of money. You can be a top performer. They're going to be a lot less reliant on the people around them because the playbooks are built, and they're going to be a lot more self-reliant, and likely a lot more motivated by their ability to really make the money that they're looking to make.
Makes sense. Jeff, have you seen kind of the evolution of the comp plan from that perspective? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, so Sarah's a lot more qualified to answer this than me, because I've worked in like very early stage startups for most of my career. A lot of what I know about bigger companies is more empirical. From what I gather and from my limited experience in bigger companies, it feels like there's more red tape and more rules, and it's a little harder to implement some of the fun stuff. But what I've also seen is that it's really not necessarily a function of company size, but more a function of like company resources and culture. So for example, like I worked at a company that really valued professional development. And so like some of the incentives we would give were like professional development based. In fact, we had someone on that team who started out with no experience in data science. She got some professional development opportunities, became one of our data scientists just by like brute forcing it, and the company like gave her the resources to do it, which was pretty cool. I got to go to the Surf and Sales event that like Richard Harris and Scott Leese put on down in Costa Rica several years ago. I like got a big sunburn and didn't really even end up learning how to surf, but I got a lot of other good stuff out of it. It was really cool, great experience. My company paid for it. Again, that was like a function of I was doing a good job at the time, and they really valued my professional development, and I came back with a lot of new ideas and things that hopefully helped that company to to grow. So that's just what I've seen. I think that it just aligns. If the company has a good culture, they'll generally put these things in place and they'll align it to what their values are. I think it's just really important too that like you work at a company that shares what the values are. Companies that don't have values that are aligned to yours, you're probably not going to be happy with how they incentivize you, right? So that's like just an important thing to always feel out, and it's important for us as leaders to make sure that our subordinates know what we value and why it matters to us. So kind of a non-answer, David. I'm not gonna lie, not a great answer to your question. I haven't worked in bigger companies, but that's just what I would say is general rule of thumb.
No, I mean, I love it. Choose to work with and around people that align with your mission. I think Naval Ravikant said, "Play long-term games with long-term people," and I really dig that. To me, that means like find people that align with who you are, your core values, and follow them and work with them and do good things with them. And that's something I not to get too deep into early life failures, but that's definitely something I failed at very early on in my career. From a comp perspective, I just chased the money, and chasing the money led to some really interesting decisions and jumping lots of different companies and choosing who I work for, some bad, some good, because I just wanted more money. And then you eventually get to a point where it's like money is not worth my mental health and everything else. I still want to make it, but if I can make good enough money and work with people that I really enjoy on a mission that I'm really passionate about, I'll ultimately, happier, more successful in the long run. So good points and good call outs, Jeff. So on a similar thread, slightly different thread as it relates to like, product-led growth. When we think about, it's kind of like the other lever or layer of comp that we haven't talked about yet, which is, how are we going to look at that? I mean, if you're giving away free trials to companies, how do we comp salespeople? Like, how do we then, most of the sales done, the product is doing the sale, and a lot of product-led growth. It's the idea. So do we comp people the same amount as if they went out and found it themselves? Like, what have you seen kind of successful there as it relates to PLG?
I can start.
Sarah.
Yeah. We definitely work with a lot of PLG, a lot of specifically usage-based pricing companies as well. And those often overlap a lot. There's not one answer. And I don't believe any company has fully figured this out yet. I think everyone's still really trying to figure out what makes sense. At the end of the day, we want to tie commissions to revenue. In this world, though, all of a sudden it's hard to predict revenue. No longer are your sales team, you're not commissioning them on bookable revenue. They're not signing contracts for a certain amount of the term. So we need to start looking at new metrics if it's not bookable revenue. It's usually going to be some sort of usage-based metric. That could be something like invoices or a usage threshold. I would say there's really 3 ways to look at it. When we've been speaking with our customers, we've been speaking with some other kind of usage-based product-led leaders. We also have a great blog post around this. We can potentially share it in the chat. But the 3 ways we look at it is, one is to calculate commissions on the committed contract value. So similar to as before, or similar to a standard SaaS model, but instead you're going to vest commission payments on the invoice collection. The second model we often see is to use invoice collection now as that first metric to then implement some sort of compensation that focuses on consumption. And then at the far end of the scale, you're looking at relying entirely on some sort of consumption-based metric to calculate pay commission. So it could be some consumption-based quota that they have to hit. There is not a one-size-fits-all. It is still being figured out. We have a lot of conversations with people around what works in this world, because it's new and there's no simple answer.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Jeff, any thoughts on PLG and the right way to comp it? Because it can it can be really, motivating to work for a company that's growing that quick and a PLG motion works. But then on the flip side, from a sales perspective, it's like, how do you attract talent using comp when that's, primarily? So any thoughts there?
Yeah. So I personally have not worked in companies that do PLG, but I advise a handful that do. So companies like SenseSpark, Lavender is one that a lot of people have heard of, Humantic AI, a few companies that have like strong PLG motions. One thing that I've noticed and that I've learned as I go on this is that even within the PLG motion, you're going to find that there is an area where your reps can really add a ton of value and where you're just not going to get those deals unless they get inserted, right? So specifically, the companies I just mentioned are actually all companies that would be used a lot by SDRs. SDRs will go and find the tools I just mentioned and download them for free and use them. And if you're lucky, they will go and tell their boss, and the boss might sign up or whatever, but that doesn't happen all the time. A lot of times an SDR just says, finders keepers, I got this new thing and I'm going to make it, my thing, and I'm going to be better than all the other SDRs. Well, that's where it would be really helpful to have somebody who can try to turn that person into a champion and show them the value of bringing it to their entire team and why that's good for them, right? And sending emails and marketing blasts, which is like, kind of a big part of the PLG motion, is like the tickler, approach. I don't know that that's going to do it, right? Like, it's kind of nice to have a human being that's kind of like a fellow salesperson that's telling you, hey, look, this is why you got to take, proverbially take me to your leader, if you will. And I don't know that I comp them less. I mean, if I've got an SDR that's doing outbound and setting up a meeting for someone and then they close that deal, that rep still didn't source the deal themselves, right? Like, I'm still paying the SDR for sourcing that lead. I'm still paying the AE for sourcing that lead. So to me, it's fundamentally not any different if it came through marketing or if it came through an SDR. I'm going to pay my rep no matter what. They have to do the same amount of work, give or take. There are some places where folks will comp more or less depending on your ability to source a deal. I find that that's usually in an enterprise setting because sourcing deals in the enterprise is a little bit harder. And so, for example, if an investor brings me an opportunity at my company, does my company want to pay me less because the investor brought it and they sourced it? That's up to them. So that's where I see that in my experience.
Yeah, I like the idea of keeping comp, fairly stable either way, because you could, drive an upsell motion to the person using it. But to your point, it's more like, taking those usage metrics, building hypothesis around value, bringing that value, up within the organization and driving a new logo deal with just more data and more previously established success, internally versus using external stories. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Cool. So folks, let's transition a little bit from the ways that we're motivating sellers to the ways that we are then optimizing these plans. So like when we talked early on in this conversation, we were talking about, look, let's pull multiple levers. Let's incentivize the right behaviors in the right ways. But how do we actually know any of that's working? I mean, so many organizations change comp plans, once a month, once a quarter, a couple times a year, however much. But we've all seen comp plans that change, and they almost always get worse. And they don't necessarily drive the actual behavior that wants to be driven. So how do we optimize the comp plan using the right data to not make them worse, but actually, strip out things that maybe aren't working and add, incentive to the areas that could? Sarah, I'll turn that one to you to start.
Sure. I mean, as a standard metric, I think we want to see about 60 to 80% of our reps hitting their target every month or every quarter, whatever your period is. You want to be looking at those specific features of your comp plans. Have you put the right kickers in the right areas? Are we overcomping? Are we undercomping our reps? Are some of those kickers potentially that we were talking about earlier that we add on incrementally, are those allowing underperformers to hit their OTE? So do we have people gamifying it to the point where they are being overcomped for it? I'd say the best way to know if it's working is let's take a look at our bottom line. Are we incentivizing the right behaviors? do we have good retention? Do we have healthy customers? Taking a look at the post sales. Comparing different plans is extraordinarily important as well. I wouldn't necessarily say try one plan on Q4, try a new plan on Q1, and then at the end of the Q1, you can say, oh, that plan was more successful than our one on Q4. Well, no, you're working in a different environment. You're working potentially with different sales reps. You're working with new leads. When you're comparing plans, you need to compare them in the exact same data. So again, Palette has a great feature with this where you can build 2 comp plans, potentially different accelerators, different kickers, motivating different behaviors, actually see how it's hopefully compensating your overperformers well and potentially undercompensating your underperformers, and really how it affects your bottom line. And that's what we're looking at improving at the end of the day. So making sure you're comparing your different comp plans on the same data set is extraordinarily important.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. I remember it's about 18 years ago, I worked at a company called Aramark, one of the largest facility service organizations in the world. And one of my first sales jobs, and eventually, got into leadership. And I caught a rep disgustingly gamifying the comp plan, because at the time they comped on soap dispensers. So there would be a kicker for every soap dispenser sold. So this rep had by far the most sold. And so I started talking to their customers, and apparently the rep would actually say, look, I'm going to buy your soap dispensers for you. I'm going to give you a box of them. Use them, if you want, or don't. It's okay. And that's what they would do. And they would get many, 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 many multiples on soap dispensers, and they would layer in 3, 4, 5x what the customer needed. And some customers didn't even need them or want them, but they would just show up at installation with a bucket of soap dispenser, with a box of soap dispensers, and they'd get all these kickers on the contract for it. So to your point, need to track what's being incentivized, make sure it's working, make sure it's driving the right behavior, because ultimately the business just lost money on that. And when I found it, we changed comp plan to fix it. But yeah. So Jeff, any stories or things from your world on ways that we can make sure we're optimizing the comp plan effectively?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Sarah kind of took a lot of the words out of my mouth, but I think there's a couple of things I could add. Maybe first and foremost, we're going to be doing kind of a cohort analysis when you do this, and you need to understand how long does it take to be able to understand, there's going to be a lagging effect, right? Because when you implement something right away, there's already deals that are in flight that were technically attached to the former comp plan. So one of the things you might want to do is think about, are there leading indicators that can help you to understand that sooner than later? And to be honest, it's not a simple answer, but are there certain behaviors that you can start to track today that are indicative of what you might see tomorrow, to help you arrive at an answer sooner? The only other thing I'd put out there too is more of a top-down approach. Generally speaking, you're going to have some sort of North Star metric as a go-to-market leader. So for some people, that's an LTV to CAC ratio. For others, it's what's called the magic number, and it's a certain ratio of your sales spend versus what you're getting back, right? It's usually some variation of that. And you can kind of look at where you're landing on that. You can be transparent about it with your team and why it matters, if it helps to motivate them. But generally speaking, if you're not reaching that number, it could be indicative that you're either overcompensating. If you're leaving excess on the table there, it might be that you're undercompensating and that you have room to compensate more. So that's something that I think you just want to align to what is the vision for what that ratio needs to look like and where do you stand against that ratio. So that's the only thing I'd add.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, on that note, we've all tried to optimize comp plans and make sure they're well aligned, but what are some challenges that organizations are running into with this, and what are you seeing them do to kind of either get their salespeople on board or overcome or get feedback? How are we, creating alignment between, the vision of the comp plan from CEO RevOps and the reception and execution and success of it, when it actually gets to the field? Jeff, any thoughts from you on how you're driving that?
Yeah, in terms of the communication around it?
The communication of it, the success of it, making sure we're doing the right things by sellers,
Yeah.
all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my organization, I mean, this might be overkill, I don't know, but we have a weekly pipeline meeting. And we use a tool called Atrium, which I'm sure people are very familiar with, given the modern sales pros and everything. But Atrium, you can pull like a lot of interesting data. We can look at how our pipeline has changed week over week. We can look at activity on each rep and how that's changing week over week or like month over month. I mean, you can get like very granular on this. And so we're looking at our pipeline coverage, like all of the leading indicators of what we need. And that's from the CEO level down to RevOps and sales engineering and customer success. You can afford to do this, obviously, in a smaller organization, right? It's like vastly important for everyone to be involved in it right now. So I think just having these regular cadences are important. I think with your reps, you obviously will do like a weekly one-on-one with them. I think like having a pipeline meeting is good. I think a forecasting meeting and also like a PG meeting, like prospecting type meeting every week. These are like all kind of additive, like in the way that like you want to be tracking all of these things in order to get to the final outcome. Like if you're not doing your PG, you're just not going to hit your goal, right? So like I think holding people accountable by having a weekly meeting about like, hey, your goal was to get 3 new meetings this week. Where were you? Why did you, how did you do it? Or if you didn't do it, why didn't you do it? Right. These are just some of the things that you're doing to try to foster that visibility, I think, across the team.
Makes a lot of sense.
I'd say in terms of bottom-up alignment, giving leadership visibility into forecast, into pipeline, being able to have an async way of anybody being able to go in and see what's going on that's what's going to create that bottom-up alignment. In terms of top-down alignment, when we're creating our commission structures, I think that misalignment often happens for one of 2 reasons. One, it's too convoluted. We create these very complex plans that maybe your CFO, your VP of sales, or your CRO aligned on, and you implement them, your reps and managers get paid out quarterly on them. They see that one number. So there's this big misalignment between what the goals, what the purpose of the plan is and what those final numbers look like. And oftentimes managers cannot even explain it to their sales reps. So big misalignment there. And then often that misalignment also happens when the plans are too simple. And it's usually this misalignment between what potentially, again, CFO sales leader wants and what usually maybe revenue ops is able to operationalize. And there's a disagreement there because they want something that's heavily probably convoluted, tied to your company goals, but you don't have the resources on your team to be able to do that. So I'd say those 2 areas are big areas of misalignment we find, and where automation can help on both fronts. All of a sudden now you can build these more complex plans that align to your company goals. Your reps have full visibility on how their actions are making them their money. They understand their plans. And now everybody really understands the results that they're getting.
Yeah, and to tailor to play that into Jay's question in the chat, and also some thoughts around just the ability to use tech to create simple complexity, if you will. Are you seeing organizations fragment comp plans and adjust them and tailor them based on the role, or even going so far as to like A/B test different comp plans to get better results and also see which ones are going to drive those results? Any thoughts there?
I mean, absolutely. We have to tailor to compensate different roles. Different roles are there for different reasons, whether the manager or to different roles based on different verticals or segments or whatever that looks like. All of those need a slightly tweaked plan, or you're not going to be incentivizing the right behavior for that role. To put it very simply, if you had the same quota for somebody in SMB as you do in enterprise, because it's easy to implement, you've just lost, and that's probably an over-exaggerated example, but you've lost this big lever. We're talking so much about how much of an expense commissions are. So use it as a lever of yours and take the time to build tailored commission plans for each role, and then use an automation tool so it's not this overly complex things to operationalize.
Yeah. To the point of kind of the earlier conversation, if there's any element that is unachievable or doesn't make someone get excited that to go out and try and pull that lever and accomplish that thing, you've wasted a big part of your future attainment that you could potentially get. So I think that makes sense. Jay, I hope that's helpful. Please elaborate on your question if you'd like us to go any deeper on that. Let's talk about the automation segment, because I don't want to miss any of that. What the value of real-time visibility and just making this easy for salespeople in the business to just at all times just see where they are. Like, to me, there's a ton of value there, but talk to us about like why you all do that and what your customers and sellers are getting out of that.
Get off. I think that visibility is going to keep them focused on high value revenue generating tasks, right? That's why we have sales rep. Absolutely, there are administrative functions that we need from them. We need good information, but automation can take a lot of that important information and create a lot of that important information. In terms of commissions, calculations in itself, and visibility there, if you don't know this, sales leaders, all of your sales reps are doing what we like to call shadow accounting. And that is when all your sales reps have their own little spreadsheet on the side because they don't understand what their comp plans mean. And they want to make sure that they're getting paid fairly. So they're spending valuable time every month after they close every deal to take a guess as to how much that deal should have brought them in. So this is going to help alleviate that shadow accounting because they'll close the deal and see exactly how much they make and keep them hyper-focused on revenue generation. I'd also say that visibility helps with that end of quarter, end of month back and forth between whether it's a sales rep, sales manager, or sales rep in finance, asking questions. It's going to completely eliminate the need for that. So that's going to alleviate a lot of that administrative time spent.
Absolutely. I think we've all been there where it's I swear it's like we couldn't kick off the year, the month, the quarter until me as a leader answered every comp discrepancy question. It's like, no, I'm not selling because my paycheck was off by $6.50. Like, oh my God, please just give me the data. All I can do it. Just the time that took, like it just wasn't worth it. So no, I totally agree. Jeff, what about your world with this one?
I agree with Sarah. The only thing I'll add is don't comp on things that you can automate now, right? Like I remember the time when people would pay based on Salesforce data completion, right? Like 20% of my past quotas were based on my ability to fill out Salesforce properly. If there's a software tool that's going to do that using conversational AI or picking up things from your meeting calendar or whatever, like I'd rather just pay that vendor that money and not my sales rep. I mean, not that I'm not trying to pay my sales rep, but I want to pay my rep for actually getting stuff done, not for like the stuff that I can automate now, right? So think about where you're allocating your resources. Make sure you're not not even double comping, but comping on things that you can automate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I got to think like, it's not just about the comp and making it easy for your sellers and rev ops. And I mean, it absolutely is, but it's not just about that. To me, there's also a cultural element here of people feeling like they were, treated fairly and got paid on time and the right amount, and that they don't need to necessarily, spend hours at the end of every month, quarter, year, calculating it and then chasing people around to get the money that, they earned. And it also needs to be simple enough so they can, check themselves, but also visible enough that they don't have to. So Sarah, any thoughts there? Are you seeing comp visibility actually drive, culture improvement?
Oh yeah. The main piece of culture it's going to drive is building trust. We've had several companies come to us because they have retention issues with their employees because they don't trust the comp that they're seeing because mistakes have been made in the past because everything has been a manual input. There hasn't been enough automation and they've lost that trust. So it's a great way to build trust with your reps. It's also a great way to engage managers and reps in building work back plans on, hey, what if you close these next 2 deals, you're going to get into this accelerator. So it's a great way to engage conversation, I'll say as well.
Absolutely. Jeff, what are you saying as relates to, culture and comp plans and automation visibility around all this?
Yeah. I mean, I think Sarah hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think that transparency is the number one driver of culture in any organization. People want to build trust with you, right? And so like the way that you do that is by being open and honest and transparent about the why and like, why are we doing it this way and how can you keep track of it? So I think leading off with transparency, visibility, if there are resources out there, whether it's Pallet or whoever else is out there to do these things, like if you've got a team of sellers, you don't want them to be worrying about how to do this stuff. Make it easy for them, right? Like show them that you care about, you want them to make a lot of money, right? Like that should be the message from day one. So I think that just transparency is probably the number one aspect of culture that you want to be promoting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to your point, comp plan drives, the money people are going to make, the culture that you're going to be displaying. So, having it, visible, easy to understand is absolutely the way. Well, look, I want to honor the time that we have with the audience. Thank you so much for being with us. Sarah, Jeff, thanks for joining as our great speakers. Angelica, I'll turn it back to you to wrap us up.
Yeah, thank you so much, David, Sarah, and Jeff, for such an informative discussion. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's event. Just a reminder, this event is recorded and we'll have the key takeaways along with all the information that our panelists mentioned, along with resources on the MSP page before the end of day. So stay tuned for that. And we'll see you at the next event. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.